Welcome to our series on climate change and its impact on eastern North Carolina. I'm your host, Natalia Sanchez Loaiza, and over the course of this podcast, we will explore how extreme weather is affecting the people and industries that make up this region. I sat down to talk with experts and workers from the region about these issues, asking them questions that many of us may have. These were insightful and long conversations that I now have the pleasure of sharing with you. Today, in this first episode, we will hear about some basic concepts from an expert on a topic that's becoming harder to ignore: extreme heat, and how it's already reshaping life in North Carolina. His name is Jordan Clark.
My name is Jordan Clark, and I am currently a Senior Policy Associate at the Nicholas Institute at Duke University, specifically within the Institute, working at the Heat Policy Innovation Hub.
The Heat Policy Innovation Hub is the first program in the United States dedicated to cross-disciplinary innovation on extreme heat policy and practice. The hub brings together scientists and communities to develop and deploy innovative policy solutions that reduce the impacts of extreme heat on human health and well-being. One of these experts is Jordan Clark, who is a climatologist by profession.
A meteorologist is focused on more short-term weather forecasts, like daily, weekly, or daily, weekly, monthly, maybe even seasonally. A climatologist is kind of really focused on the science of a bit longer-term projections, like seasonally, yearly.
The day we spoke over video call, he shared how his passion for weather started when he was a child.
It's like perfectly aligned with what I always wanted to be when I was I think 10. I was super obsessed with the weather by then.
This is your local forecast, weather information you can plan on, because we show it on the 8s of every hour. Local on the 8s on the Weather Channel.
Like a weather geek, always watching the Weather Channel growing up. And so I was always super interested in the weather.
Enthralled by the weather's dynamism and its impact on everyone's lives.
It's something that impacts everybody and everybody's day. It's just so impactful. But there's also just so much uncertainty and unknowns around the weather and predicting it and forecasting it. And it's a very dynamic process. The thunderstorms booming, the lightning flashing, it's very catchy. You have the wind blowing in different directions and a cold front comes through and it totally changes and you get a cold air blast. And it's always, I guess, just been something, how dynamic and ever changing it is. It's hard to get bored.
And although he always had this interest since childhood, it was actually watching one of those dynamic weather events that convinced him to pursue this profession.
I remember seeing a big snowstorm happening. I think it was 2002 or something. And I feel like that was the defining moment where I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I might start looking into this.
Which is now paradoxical because Clark's work currently focuses on the opposite: extreme heat, one of the hallmark effects of climate change. But what do we mean when we talk about climate change? A basic concept that's important for us to understand.
Climate change is the ever-evolving nature of our climate over the past 20, 40, 50, 100 years.
That is, climate change is not a new phenomenon. It's a process that occurs naturally, but also is anthropogenic.
Anthropogenic is just kind of a fancy, unnecessary way of saying man-made, man-caused, caused by humans and emissions, gas emissions, greenhouse gas, and things like that.
And as the name suggests, all of these leads to changes.
More extremes, a warming world, hotter temperatures. It's just this, ultimately it's a global level situation where everybody's climate is changing from what they used to know it as. So it's just broadly it's very impactful, literally globally.
But even though it's not a new phenomenon, there is a reason why we're hearing more about it recently.
The reason we're talking about it now, I think, or talking about it more now, is one, because we seemingly kind of crossed a threshold where every year is a bit more extreme. and it's a bit more extreme everywhere. And so it's capturing everyone's attention and imagination.
The changes that were once predicted to take a certain amount of time are now happening more extremely and sooner than expected.
It's something that's happening now. And I think there's a lot of conception that it's, oh, I won't see it, or like, oh, my children might see it. But no, it's what the agriculture and just kind of environmental landscape itself looks like right now will be quite different from 10 or 15 and by 20 years from now. There's a lot of talk of uncertainty in these predictions, and there is a lot of uncertainty, but it seems consistently over the past several years, essentially, that this uncertainty has been underestimating how hot it's going to be and how quickly it's going to be that hot. What we used to think would be 30 years is actually 10 years from now. It's just an example. So there's impacts are present now, and they're going to increasingly become more so.
And as we mentioned, these are extreme changes observed all around the world, and of course, here in North Carolina as well.
The climate change impacts in North Carolina, they're so varied and numerous. It's kind of daunting to think about talking or like thinking through them all. It's really impactful to like every sector, every person's life, every job, every place in the state.
But among all of those impacts, I asked Clark to talk about the ones that mainly affect the area from where you're likely listening to us, coastal or eastern North Carolina. It's likely that the consequences we imagine or the first ones that come to mind are very extreme and catastrophic, easy to observe and understand, like a species extinction.
There are so many, but environmentally wise, it's really resulting in increasing instances of extinction of animals and plants, mass extinctions, just loss of habitat, animals having to migrate if they're able to be able to sustain their population, and just kind of like environmental degradation, essentially.
Changes like sea level rise can lead us to think about impacts on coastal infrastructure and housing access in that area, as well as consequences for marine life. But there are other impacts that might not be as evident and that are currently affecting the economy of the entire state. In addition to the coast and its beaches, the eastern part of the state is characterized by being rural and having extensive fields for crops and livestock.
With a lot more agricultural and ag labor and manufacturing and hog farming, all of these things, creating a situation where a region that is specialized and thus, somewhat dependent on these specific sectors.
According to the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, agriculture and agribusiness, including food, forestry, and fiber, contribute more than $100 billion to the state's economy, making it the state's #1 industry. What would happen to these sectors?
So it's this impact on agriculture itself, and as far as like what I can grow, what I can produce, what I can count on being able to grow here. Where we grow crops now is not going to be where we're able to grow those same crops 10, 20, 30 years from now. It's going to impact those sectors, but that then also impacts everyone's lives associated with that.
In other words, it also affects the lives of farm workers and ranchers, landowners.
There was a fatality in a farm east of Raleigh last year where the heat index was about 97 and it was above a threshold.
These consequences are due to different changes. On one hand, the increase in temperatures or extreme heat.
Because in a warming climate, there's more incidences of diseases in plants, higher humidity, and it doesn't get as cold at night. So that just encourages like fungal growth and kind of mold situations that really then hurt the productivity of the plant itself and make it a lot less productive.
But it's also due to other inconsistencies in the climate.
But also we're having a lot more variations in extreme dry periods than extreme wet periods. It's like the summer we started off very, very dry, and now it's like we've just been getting rain kind of all the time. There's a lot less consistency.
which also impacts other industries.
Ag and livestock farming in general, yeah, is probably at the top. Let's see, like the construction kind of building, structural engineering kind of thing, that's all impacted. That's all outdoors. Roofing, all of those kind of very necessary, but also very necessary. And obviously they have to be outside and doing things, would thus be impacted.
And some that are not as obvious.
But also things like, I mean, like an example I thought of just now that might not be considered is like, okay, like childcare centers. Okay, so how can these people and these organizations start to deal with these hotter temperatures? Are they just not going to let the kids go outside? Is that going to impact children's development? If they do let the kids go outside, are they going to get harmed? Are they going to burn themselves? Are they going to get heat stress? So it's kind of, that's like a good example of just kind of the widespread layout of kind of what the impacts are. And that extends also to, I think, something North Carolina also takes pride in, which is like high school football, like Friday Night Lights, like those kind of the impacts there is limiting practicing and increasingly making games more hazardous, not only for the student athletes playing, but also the people watching the game who are in crowded spaces and blocking the wind.
And if there is perhaps a change that doesn't seem to be as widely discussed, because it might not sound as drastic, but at the same time, according to Clark, it is the biggest change on this side of the state.
In the eastern part of the state, I think the bigger impact's kind of what we talked about already about the increasing overnight temperature and humidity. That's particularly worse in the eastern part of the state. We have definitely seen a steady increase in temperatures here. However, the change has not been as much going from like maximum temperatures of 85, 90, 95, 100 that you might see in the west. It's more a few degrees increase in that daytime temperature. So, especially in the southeast U.S., where we may see some increase in maximum temperatures, but our biggest impacts are going to be on higher humidity and higher overnight temperatures. It's these more and more nights above 70, now more and more nights above 75.
And even though this might not sound so severe, it actually presents us with a more widespread problem that can affect anyone in North Carolina.
Alongside that small increase in daytime temperature is a lot more humid conditions, a lot more moisture and humidity, which adds to heat stress. It impacts our body's ability to cool off. The sweat can't evaporate as quickly. So there won't be those cool evenings and nights where those without air conditioning or efficient homes won't be able to cool down as effectively as they stand now.
So it's not just about protecting ourselves from exposure to temperatures of 90 or 100 degrees when we go outside, but also about paying attention to humidity and whether our bodies have had enough time to cool down at night. This is a fact that surprised me a lot when we spoke with Clark. I had never thought of heat as something that can build up in the body over days. All of this makes us more vulnerable to the effects of heat.
It's just your vulnerability is framed by a lot of things, such as how hydrated you are, what you did the previous day, and what you're going to be doing today. Just because heat is very cumulative and it just builds up in the body. And so if you've not been properly hydrating and if you've been outside for 2 or 3 days in a row and you're not normally considered vulnerable, your vulnerability has gone up a lot over those 3 days. It's like our body's continuously producing heat via our metabolism. So our core temperature metabolism is generating heat that slowly goes to the surface of our skin where we can get rid of it or we breathe some of it out. And if you're exposed on day one to very high temperatures and your body's a bit stressed, and then the key thing being overnight, if the temperatures don't cool down, you don't have air conditioning, your body's not able to really like chill out, literally. It just kind of stays in this slightly stressed state.
And the consequences of heat stress can also be severe.
And the thing is, it's getting hotter, and that's the real concern. It has a broad impact on an array of chronic conditions, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, renal disease, kidney diseases, and mental health has been increasingly shown to be impacted negatively by extreme heat.
Moreover,
Heat is the leading cause of weather-related death in the country. More deaths than flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes combined, and maybe one other natural disaster in there combined. So it's the leading cause of weather-related death, and its impact is actually underestimated because we don't have a great system for saying, oh, this person died because of the heat. It might just be that they said they died of cardiac arrest, but what they didn't say was that they were in a hot home for 2 days prior to that exacerbated their condition. So there's a wide array of effects on health, even while there's a lot of emphasis on the more vulnerable groups like the elderly or the super young. Essentially, I think it's always important to emphasize that every single person is vulnerable.
and even more so, extreme heat particularly impacts those living in energy poverty, where people have to choose between paying for air conditioning and meeting essential needs like food or medicine.
That specifically gets to the concept of energy poverty, where it's choosing between paying my energy bill to run my AC or being able to buy my prescription medicines or buy food. This choice that should not have to be made has to be made due to this energy poverty situation and it's an increasingly large impact, particularly in our area, North Carolina, and the more rural parts of the state.
It's a difficult math. Jordan explains the mission of the Heat Policy Innovation Hub, which focuses on extreme heat mitigation and developing tools to address heat risks. The hub works to bridge the gap between research, policy, and community action.
Acting as an entity to bring all of these stakeholders together, diverse stakeholders together, centered on this topic to hopefully kind of move things forward. Because for a long time, and I think this is true in many disciplines, there's a lot of siloing between disciplines. Like climatologists work with climatologists and do climatologist research, and the public health people, they work with public health people and do public health research. And so getting those two groups actually in the same room and maybe doing research together allows the best of both worlds and allows for a lot more robust progress. And that's true for the policy side as well, just trying to actually get things done that is able to implement change and impact people's lives.
One of the projects Clark has worked on to improve the lives of citizens is the Heat Action Toolkit.
Over the past year prior, with North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, NC State University, and the North Carolina State Climate Office, and the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resilience to build a heat action toolkit. So it's a template, essentially, that is geared towards allowing a county or a city to very easily kind of fill in the blanks about how they will tackle extreme heat mitigation, but then also how they will deal with extreme heat emergencies once they're happening. And as a part of that entire toolkit, a big part of mine work, which kind of gets back to that small bit of data analysis I do, was coming up with a new county level warning system for heat.
A new region-specific heat index, which accounts for factors like humidity, wind speed, and sunlight across different regions of North Carolina.
I modeled emergency department visits with heat index across the state in various regions and essentially defined the temperature at which there's a notable increase in risk. So that threshold temperature would be the point at which, hey, we should start messaging people. We should start encouraging our communication channels, filtering things down, getting the word out, that kind of thing. And so that's defined now. It's, I believe, 7 regions across the state, because that's important because our state is very varied. We have the mountains on the west, beach on the coast, and I think part of the mountains, the heat index threshold for, starting that engagement and outreach is 94 compared to like 102 in the southeastern part of the state. So there's a very clear distinction that is necessary because it just doesn't get as hot in the mountains. And so people feel the effects of heat at lower temperatures.
As Clark mentioned earlier, working in North Carolina can be daunting due to its geography.
Because you realize how like you can want to do something so bad and you can actually make some difference, but then you also, like you just said, you realize that the many other problems and stuff. So it's very overwhelming. So I kind of have to find myself like being like, okay, let's just cut out all that other stuff for this moment and like be like, okay, we made a difference on that one. Yes. So it's definitely a rewarding experience.
Clark is already passionate about what he does. When we spoke, I also wondered, aside from the fascination and constant learning, how he feels about these issues. There is an increasing amount of writing about a particular anxiety regarding climate change, a concern that many of us can feel about what lies ahead.
I personally find a lot of concern and stress about it. I'm just kind of thinking, especially when seeing other people not put emphasis on climate change when it's the biggest threat to humanity's continued existence. Literally on this planet, it's COVID times a billion. It's very, very pressing, affecting everyone, every job, every sector, every place, every person to be. And that has really helped motivate me even more to kind of try to do more and more with the work I'm doing as much as I can. But I also have hope that humans are very resilient and we have a lot of diverse knowledge and diversity to build upon to do some change and do some more good. And we've already done some things with climate change related mitigation and adaptation things with federal funding and state level involvement. So I do have some hope though as well.
So there is an urgency to educate ourselves. The changes and the heat we're experiencing aren't going away, and we need to be prepared. In our next episode, we will continue this journey by exploring how climate change is affecting coastal North Carolina. We'll hear from experts and workers on the front lines, sharing their experiences of how the changing climate is reshaping their lives. Until then, stay safe and thank you for listening.